Hello, everyone. This is Renee Rentmeester again. I'm the creator and executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking TV show and podcast. And today, this should be a lot of fun. We've got two former broadcasters together, myself and Michael Schwartz. Welcome, Michael.
Renee, very good to be with you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks. And thank you for being here. I know you could have done lots of things, but you're here with us today. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your blindness.
Sure. Where to begin? Um, I'm so glad you asked me to talk about myself and then also talk about the blindness. It's so interesting that we have this ability to distinguish between the person we are and the person that also includes the fact that we are blind and not identifying ourselves necessarily as a blind person. So I really appreciate the perspective you're bringing to this conversation. We are so much more than the abilities or the disabilities that are a part of us. I've had over the course of my life the opportunity to have so many experiences. And blindness has woven its way in and out of those experiences in very important ways. But I've also had the good fortune to be able to experience a life where I get to explore who I am in so many different ways and shades. You know, I was brought up by an Air Force veteran and an English teacher who both wore many hats over the course of their lives. And I learned while growing up just how open the world can be when you are open to the possibility of new experiences. And I've had this amazing good fortune to have been exposed to so many adventures and experiences because of the perspectives that I got from my parents. Um, just so many, in so many ways, both small and large. You know, my father very much encouraged me to work almost as soon as I was able to. And my first experience working was behind the counter at a Baskin Robbins. And I'm so glad that that was my first job experience. Something, even though I haven't had as much ice cream ever since, working for an entire summer behind a Baskin Robbins will kind of sour you on, on 31
Yeah, I
flavors.
used to work in a pickle factory during the summers, and like I'm not the hugest pickle fan either, so I understand.
So you get it. And I was so, pun intended, chilled by the experience. The next summer, I thought, well, I eat a lot of pizza. What if I get a job at a Little Caesars? And unfortunately, the experience did not repeat itself. I'm still a pizza fanatic. But I feel I've done everything you can do over the course of a life when it comes to work. Everything from if I'm going to be adopting, say, a rhyming mentality, I've been a pizza maker and a census taker. Um, I've loaded trucks. I've I've been involved in my, let's call them my grown-up years. Um, I worked as a broadcast journalist. Um, I left broadcast journalism to start a video production company. And then when I moved out here to California, as that business ended up developing here in San Francisco, where I live now, I worked in that field for a number of years, working on projects that I really felt called to participate in. And these days, sometimes I say that I finally figured out what I want to be when I grow up. Because like so many people in San Francisco, I wear two hats. I have two jobs. Um, these days, at the point that this podcast is being recorded, I work as an accessible technology trainer, and I also recently started my coaching practice. I was certified as an integral development coach, something we may want to delve into as far as the specifics of what that really means.
Yeah, tell us what that is.
Sure. Um, so coaching, coaching to me feels like the pinnacle of so much of what my life has been building towards, especially with the aspect of blindness that is in the mix. Integral development coaching really hinges on the idea that we have three intelligence centers. So many of us live in our head center. I know I have,
Right, right.
but integral coaching factors in the fact that we have two others, our heart center and our body center. And these are two centers that so often in our lives, in pursuit of whatever it is that we are in pursuit of, we tend to want to think our way through it. And we don't often put the same emphasis on what we're feeling as we're moving through the different challenges that confront us, or what our own bodies are telling us. And we can take in clues. We can be our own private detectives in our own lives by learning to tune in to what are the emotions that we're feeling in addition to what we're thinking. What are the sensations that are coming through our bodies when we are confronted with challenge? And the kind of coaching that I felt called upon to pursue moves from that idea, especially in our community, when it comes to the challenges that we all face. Challenges that might be verbalized as I feel stuck, or I feel adrift, or I'm not showing up in the world the way I would prefer to show up in the world. I know there's room for growth and room for depth, but how? It really moves beyond the questions that so much of us face on the day to day. The what do I want to do? Or even the how do I do it? But integral coaching focuses on the much bigger question, who do I want to be? And I found in this world, especially this world in our space, the disability space, for example, that we can be so laid low by not having a pathway to answer that question because of the overwhelming challenge sometimes of moving through blindness.
And Michael, how did you go blind, if you might answer that for us?
I really appreciate you asking that question because I lost the sight of my right eye due to a degenerative retinal disease when I was 13 years old. And I have known ever since that point in my life that the other eye would not be that far behind eventually. I have known for decades that the world I inhabit right now, total blindness, was coming for me, so to speak.
Oh no. That must have been tough when you were 13. I mean, because you're going through so many other changes.
It was something to wrap my head around. The idea that every celebrated life event at that time really felt like there was another shoe to drop. I've had the very good fortune to have had the support of my family in going through that confusion. And while I can say, yes, I've had the experience of, say, taking the driver's license test, that experience was colored by the fact that there is going to be an expiration date
Sure.
tied to that driver's license that had nothing to do with the date on the card. I
Right.
have been as avid a traveler as I have been able to be, what with the requirements of what is it the millennials call it, Renee? Adulting?
Oh, yes,
Um,
adulting. Yeah,
adult.
that's so cute.
Less, no less said about that, the better, I think. But um, amid the constraints of everyday life, I've tried to travel where I can. Um, I've been to at this point 49 of the 50 states. Looking at you, Maine. Um, I've, I've had the chance to travel to Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, and really explore all through the vision loss that has been a progression since I was 13 years old. And the challenge has always been how do you value the experience, but yet not treat it like you're living on one side of a wall,
Mhm.
that you have sight on one side of the wall and blindness on the other, a very dualistic way of thinking that has not been easy to move beyond, frankly. Um, how do you value this experience as a sighted person and know that it's not a hard stop just on the other side or through it, through the low vision that so many of us, including myself, have moved through? How do you really value the present moment,
Right,
whatever
right.
that present moment is? And that's something that also comes out in my experience, both coaching and being coached. It's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress, as we all are.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this idea that taking value and taking worth in whatever is happening right now is okay. And that the future will very much take care of itself. Sometimes my mother and I joke about challenges that we're facing or challenges we see on the horizon, and we'll say, "Oh, that is a problem for future Michael. That is a problem for future mom, etc." And you know what? It's a really clarifying effect to has a really clarifying effect to come to that realization that you know what, for as many things as we all have to deal with, whether it's something mundane or important, like paying the utility bill or paying the rent, or you know, um, a
My
particularly challenging
my
surgery,
line is
etc.
usually we'll figure it out.
Yes, that is very much a key to moving through life. Maybe the right word isn't happiness, but maybe the right word is contentment. The idea that
Right.
we can be content with that idea. You know, a good friend of mine, um, who is also blind, who I should also recommend to you after the show to be on the show, um, opened me up to one of um, her favorite authors and now one of mine also, Michael Singer, and one of his books called The Surrender Experiment. I love this book, The Surrender Experiment, because the entire pathway of the book is focused on the ideas. What if you just surrender to whatever the universe is offering you? Now, I did say I'm in San Francisco, so of course I'm getting a little California woo-woo on you. I hope that's okay.
No, no, no. I love it. No,
Okay.
I love it. It's true. You stay in the moment, you allow whatever happened to happen. Now that doesn't mean you can't take control in some way, but it's like if you see a train coming towards you, you probably want to get off the tracks. But if you don't see a train, live your happy life before the train.
Renee, that is such a wonderful example. Take that idea of you're standing on the train tracks and the train is coming at you. I think in our world, so often we think that surrender means, well, I'm giving up. Just going to stand here and get hit by the train. That is not
No,
what surrender means.
no.
Surrender means I accept the fact this train's coming. If I don't accept the reality of the train coming, I am gonna get hit by that train, you know?
It'd be
But if I accept the
painful.
train's coming, then I'm like, okay, what do I do about this? I can
You have
jump
to
off
figure
those
out some
tracks.
sort of an action to take. Take
That's
take action somehow.
exactly. You have it exactly. Surrender simply means that you accept the reality that something is happening for you. Not positive, not negative. It's just happening. And in my own life, moving through this idea of and this reality of losing my sight, and being totally blind has created both a mindset and a heart set and a body set for me that helps answer the question, well, what do I do in the present to accept that and move through it in a way that allows me to be true to myself? Now that can be a lifetime's worth of work. I'll let you know when I'm done. But working with people as a coach, this is why being a coach right now has called to me so deeply, because this was a leveling event in my life, becoming blind. It has completely affected how I move through the world. There is very little, if anything, I can think of in the moment that I don't do as a blind person. How I take in information, how I move from one event to the other, how I do my job, how I cook a meal. Everything that I do might happen through the prism of blindness. And yet, if you ask me who I am, my first answer is not usually, oh, I'm a blind man.
Right, right.
We are not downgrading or denigrating the reality of blindness. We are taking something that has been a traumatic event in all of our lives as blind men and women and children. And we are saying we are so much deeper than the most traumatic event that has ever happened to us, whatever that traumatic event
There's so
happens to
much
be.
more than our eyesight. I mean, like that's probably, the least percent of what we are. You can be like you can have a wonderful life and still not have your eyesight. You can do so many things. I mean, you can't drive, but maybe sometime there will be the self-driving car. But other than that, pretty much anything.
Renee, I'll never forget, and how could I ever forget the day that I went to the DMV and turned in my driver's license for a state identification card. Um, I remember it with absolute clarity, like it happened this morning.
Wow.
And I remember handing my card over, and even though it didn't happen in reality, I heard a door slam. I felt that twice in my life. That day, um, when I gave up my driver's license, and the first day that an orientation and mobility instructor put a cane in my hand. That cane on that day felt like a door slam. And it took a long time to move beyond that feeling of shame. I'm different. I'm not going to be moving through the world like everybody around me.
What we didn't reveal is that at one point you were a television reporter before you went totally blind, and we know that to actually work in TV and TV news, this isn't to be offensive, but you have to have some sort of an ego. So going blind might have like attacked your ego too, right?
Yeah, that's right. And as we move into that idea, uh, um, we definitely should talk about ego. I just want to emphasize though that those two events that felt like a door slamming became doors that were opening. It took me time to move into that.
Sure.
Um, I love that cane today. It is information, you know. Um, there are so many times when I'm out in the world and that sound of the cane striking something is startling to some of the people around me, and they will immediately want to assist. Um, and my opportunity to be able to have a conversation, even if it's the briefest of moments, to share that that's information. You know, that cane is what is keeping me in the world on an independent basis. That cane is what allows me to hike the Grand Canyon. That cane is what allows me to get to work and home from work and everywhere in between. that lack of a driver's license, that's a biggie. That's a biggie. We shouldn't ignore that. Um, it has also opened up the ability and the capacity to problem solve in a way that I might not have expected and probably wouldn't have invited. Um, but it plays into something that I am absolutely evangelical about when it comes to what I do as an accessible technology trainer, when I speak to potential employers for the people I'm training. They see a closed door, I see an open window. And when they hear me say, you want to hire a blind person because you are hiring the best problem solver you will ever hire. That's what our life is. Our life is 24/7 problem solving. So you mentioned the ego. Um, so yeah, um, being a broadcast journalist, um, it's it was just I don't even know where to begin. It was a person that was a person who was very on the surface because that person and that life almost requires you to be.
Right, right.
Um, you know, I'm sure you can echo the same feeling in your own broadcast experience that in service of the ever-present deadline pressure, um, everything else is off the table, you know, whatever you have to do, and whatever serves what you're doing. Now, I loved being a reporter at that point in my life. I really loved it. I loved being the guy that's out there in the snow.
It's like
Telling,
constant education.
yeah, it is a constant education, and I loved the adrenaline of it. I loved being the guy
Yeah.
who was out there in the snow telling you not to go out in the snow. Um, you know, um,
Oh, you were
I
that guy.
I was more times than I care to admit. Yes,
Every time I
yes.
see somebody like that, I think back, man, how's his contract doing? Like,
Good question.
he's out in
Yeah,
the rain, he's in the snow.
that's right. You name the weather condition, reporters have been in it. Um, um, and we come back to this idea of ego. In that life, I became very used to the idea that my phone calls got returned. That if it was 4:30 in the afternoon and I needed something for my story, um, I didn't wait for a phone call. Um, I just went and got it.
Mhm.
Bugged people at their offices, showed up where I wasn't supposed to be because I needed something or felt I needed it. I definitely wanted it, felt that I needed it. My assignment desk, they felt they needed it too. So that's part of the reason I was out there. Um, but there is a way of being in the world that starts to become just who you are in that world. The idea you can that if everything is in service of not missing a deadline, then that really colors how you experience the world.
You've missed
If
out
what
on
is
other things.
That's right, you miss out on other things. That's right, and you end up having a very strange relationship with the world. Um, um, we used to joke around the fact that you could get away with anything because the only thing that was sacrosanct was the deadline. If 6:01 and 30 seconds comes around and your story isn't in there, they just can't like rerun an episode of Lassie in your place. That story has to be there. So that creates a situation where the ends always justify the means. And a newsroom becomes a very cutthroat and um, very mercenarial
Oh my
kind of
God.
place, as you know, as you know. Um, you know, do you have to speed? Do you have to cut corners? Do you have to be the person who doesn't want to knock on the door of the family who just lost their daughter in a car accident, but you have to because that's what needs to be on the air
It's
in
part
an
of the
hour.
story.
Part of the story. Um, but I remember this with clarity also. I was living in Memphis, and it was Christmas Day um, in the year 2000. And it was a Sunday, as I recall. It must have been because I turned on the television on as I was getting ready to go to work on Christmas, and there's Tim Russert doing Meet the Press.
Right.
And I thought at the time, I was just a kid, and I thought I was just going to tear the world up with how great a reporter I was. Um, and I remember seeing this and thinking, there's Tim Russert in his 60s, which at the time was just an unfathomable age for me. But um, and I
How's he
thought,
still working?
uh, here's Tim Russert, who is at the pinnacle of his career, and he's working on a Sunday on Christmas. And I thought, wow, okay, that's what I'm going to have to come to terms with. That there will be no Christmases off. There will be no weekends off. There will be no holidays, that all serves television news. And that's the first time I started realizing, speaking of expiration dates, that there was an expiration date on my dedication to this career. Now, as it happened, the blindness ended up driving the bus for me because um, I remember, you are probably familiar, as are many people who are listening to this, with what floaters are when it comes
Uh-huh.
to retinal detachments. Um, what I'd been waiting for, not in a positive way, but what I'd been waiting for most of my teenage and adult life up to that point happened in the middle of a live shot. In the middle
Oh
of a
my
live shot,
God.
starting to see floaters during a live shot. I've got the tape. Um, and um, I, I knew exactly what was happening while I was pitching to the package, the story. Um, and, you know, what did I do? Well, I finished the live shot, of course,
Oh my
um,
God.
and then went to the hospital. Um, and that was one of the last stories I ever did. Um, and I found myself in and out of several surgeries over several years, back and forth in the newsroom at the beginning. Um, and at a certain point, after it became clear, one, to me and my family, and then also to um, the company I worked for, that that my story was not going to end conventionally well. There wasn't going to be what we might think of as the happy ending, where this problem gets fixed, you go back to work, and oh, wasn't that a terrible thing that happened? That was not going to happen. After what ended up at that point being the last surgery um, for these retinal detachments, um, um, I was fired, Renee. I was fired.
Oh
Um,
no, for being blind?
um, yes, not to put too fine a
But
point
they
on it, but
couldn't
yes.
legally say that, right?
No, no. Renee, you know in the business that when it comes to the on-air staff and many of the off-air staff also, there's
Right.
this phrase in your contract called the other duties as assigned clause. You know, you are not hired to be a reporter, you're not hired to be an anchor. That's not what you signed a contract for. That happens to be your primary job duty, but you are also being contracted with to perform other duties as assigned. So the company I worked for very much took the opportunity of that clause in the contract to say, well, what if we need you to be an anchor? How are you going to read it? How will you read a teleprompter? What if um, breaking news happens and there's no photographer available? Photographers usually drove in a two-person relationship in the news
Right.
in the newsroom. But what if there's no photographer available and you can't drive? My feeling at the time was, well, I think we're going to have to figure this out, right? Um, and they were not willing to figure that out. Now, I will say that my news director, a wonderful man, a good friend, he went to the wall for me. Um, and he offered at the time, he said, how far do you want me to go? And I said, you don't need to go that far. You don't need to quit to prove this point. Um, because my family and I sat down at this point. I mean, they did fire me. They terminated my contract. And we sat down and said, what do we do? What should we do? I was in my 30s and I had the rug pulled out from under me. I'm, living at my parents' house at that point, went
Oh,
from, this career that was on an interesting and I think upward trajectory. And all of a sudden I'm in the home I grew up in. And at the time, the decision was this, because at the time I was still what we, in our community call high partial, moving into low vision,
sure.
um, was the decision to have this battle. And what we came to was the idea that I could spend the next 10 years of my life fighting and probably winning that battle, all to have this right, and my, I'm using air quotes now, to have this right to go back to work for a company that didn't want me. And I thought I need more than that.
The way technology is now, though, I think you could have almost done it. Minus the driving.
I,
But just think of it. See news through the eyes of a blind man, and there are a lot of news stories that being blind would be really actually pretty interesting at that story.
I think the challenge at the time was always, we would be doing, say, live shots where you're waiting for somebody to come out of the courthouse. And how are you going to know that? That was an example that was pitched to me. Or what do you do? Renee,
Well,
you
your
probably are,
photographer would do it. They
your photographer would do it. There are communication issues. I don't think it's an undoable thing. And I think it was just as doable then as it is now.
sure.
I think actually it might have been more practical then because of the division of labor. Now in the broadcast industry, you are truly not just what existed then in smaller markets.
You're
You are
everything.
truly a one-man band.
Yeah.
Um, the idea that you would be hired as strictly a photographer or strictly a reporter or strictly an editor, for
Those
example,
days are done.
that those days have been gone for quite a while now. Um, um, at the same time, we live in an age today where, thanks to companies like Apple, you don't get to play in their playground unless you consider accessibility. You don't get to design an app um, unless you have figured out how to make it work with voiceover. Um, you don't get to design Final Cut Pro, the video editing software for Apple,
Right.
Apple's proprietary software. You don't get to make that unless you figure out a way to make it accessible for visually impaired people. Um, and I find that fascinating. So in many ways, the world as it existed in the first decade of the 21st century seems like a foreign country compared to what is just accepted now as to what is accessible in the blind space. Is it a perfect world? Not really. There's a lot to, we have a long way to go. But as several people I'm going to plagiarize from have said, the long arc of history bends towards justice, but I'm going to paraphrase it by saying the long arc of history also bends towards inclusion.
Right.
When we think of the big picture, there are more people who want inclusion and who want to provide it than there are who aren't. And that's my optimistic view of the world we live in.
Exactly. Well, Michael, let me ask you this. I know you love to cook, so what recipe did you bring to Cooking Without Looking today?
We're moving into the cooking segment. Yes, cooking is very
I know that was
much.
a little abrupt, right?
That was a hard turn there, Renee. Yes. So, yeah. So yes, as much as I like working with people as a coach and moving through that world, cooking is my personal therapy. Um, so let me ask you this, Renee, as we move into the cooking segment, what's your, we all have our favorite comfort foods. What are some of your favorite comfort foods?
Well, you know what's funny is there's a difference between eating my comfort foods and preparing my comfut foods.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
I'd love to hear both.
well, when I'm really busy, um, the I would come home and I would just make the biggest dinner you could ever imagine. I love to, like, you know, if I'm making something, I like to make something with some sort of a meat, whether it's chicken or burger or steak, or not really steak, but roast. And
Hmm.
I love just preparing that with mashed potatoes and my gravy. I don't use gravy mix. I do it from scratch. So that's my favorite comfort food just to sit and prepare. But then my favorite comfort food to eat is lasagna.
Oh, okay. Now the interview from with the now the interview with Sylvia is starting to come into focus. Okay. All right. Consult your prior episodes, listeners. Okay.
That's right. Go
All
back
right.
2 episodes.
I have so many comfort foods. When I was growing up, um, you know, um, my mother worked at a time when many people didn't. Um, and so, we all, were responsible for knowing how to cook. Now, I don't want to go crazy on this because it still was for at the time, and I still don't know how she did it. You know, my mother working a full-time job um, she was a teacher when I was younger. Um, and then as my sister and I grew up, she worked in the marketing department of a major hospital in the town I grew up in, and then she started her own business, and encountered everything that you would expect um, um, a woman in the 80s to encounter in the 80s and 90s. Um, and how she also did so many things that were the glue in our family. It's still just beyond me, but my love of cooking and my desire to help out and have that be an important part of my own life comes from her. So when it comes to comfort foods, I feel like I learn from the best. And then I love from there just developing my own twists on things. But sometimes I come home and I just want to make some macaroni and cheese, you know?
Right.
And that's what I would like to share with you today, because I am going to bring back that old broadcaster's ego and say that I make the world's best macaroni and cheese. And if I may, I'd love to share that recipe with you and the audience.
We love to hear it. And by the way, to everyone listening, Michael's recipe for the macaroni and cheese, which is extra special, is on our website at www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com. And if that website is a little long for you to remember, you can just Google Cooking Without Looking and it will pop up.
I know I'll be doing the same for all the other recipes, especially that lasagna.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, when she made the lasagna, she used the noodles that you don't have to boil. But
Exactly.
I went home,
Yes.
I went home and tried it, and it was sort of like, obviously I didn't put enough water or sauce in it. It was sort of like
Oh
eating the bottom
no.
of your shoe with
Oh
sauce
no.
on. Yeah, it was like that. Yep, yep, yep.
Well, this is not a no boil recipe. You're going to have to boil some water here. Um,
Okay.
But I'm going to add that from a blindness perspective, we can make what can be sometimes a fearful process. We're afraid of the water kind of coming to a roiling boil or boiling over the top, especially when we're working with a gas stove. That can feel a little intimidating. So I want to recommend a product that you can search for on Amazon. Um, I'm not going to recommend a specific brand, but I recommend buying a ceramic cooking disc.
Ah,
These this is something that chefs use also, professional chefs. Um, you put a ceramic disc, this ceramic disc at the bottom of your pot, and one, it gives you a good shaking sound when the water is boiling,
oh yeah.
that you can hear from across the kitchen. Um, but it also helps prevent a roiling boil um, from that foaminess where the boil comes over the top. So, now it's not going to stop anything. So if you've got water up to the line, up to the edge, your water is gonna boil over. But but it prevents kind of that pressure of the foam boil in most cases that I've experienced from spilling over the side. So um, so where would you like me to go from here with the recipe? Do we
Well, let's start from the top.
okay. So would you like me to start with the ingredients? What you'll need?
That would
Um,
help.
okay. I figured that was it. I didn't know whether you wanted me to talk about what made it special, but as you hear the ingredients, this will be what makes it special. So you will need these ingredients. And let me try to voice this in such a way that for all of us who are listening to the podcast, gives you a moment if you're in the kitchen going over this, you have time to get to the pause button. So you can either put it in your notes or braille it or whatever we need to do to have this. So you what you will need. Let's start with 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I like extra virgin, um, and I personally, I like the way that Mediterranean olive oil um, um, works when you're using that with the macaroni. But we'll go from there. So you'll need 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. You'll need salt and pepper to taste. You'll need about 8 to 10 ounces of macaroni. Or if you are cheating, you can get yourself 2 boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese, ditch that cheddar cheese powder. But 2 boxes, a box of macaroni and cheese is roughly about 5 ounces. So, that's about if you're trying to get a feel for what that feels like if you're not using, say, a talking scale and you're trying to, or you're not, or you don't have measuring cups, dry measuring cups. That'll give you a feel for what 10 ounces is like. 10 ounces roughly equals 2 boxes of mac and cheese.
Ah, okay.
You're going to need about 4 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. That is usually
A
half
quarter
of a
cup.
bar. So you could break a bar in half or half a bag if you're using shredded cheddar cheese. Because so many of us don't have all of the tools to measure, but we can figure out a way to feel our way through this using the conventional
Exactly.
amounts that are included with what you might buy in the store. Um, so that might not seem like enough cheddar cheese. Bear with me. I'm going, or enough cheese.
You have
Bear
to
with me.
remember, I'm from Wisconsin. There's never enough cheese.
I agree. When I was growing up, there was never enough garlic.
Oh.
So, so my mom's chili recipe. My dad and I would always sneak more garlic at the table. So, okay. Um, you're going to need about a quarter cup of milk. You're going to need 1 egg beaten. Now, here's where it might get interesting. You will want 1 Roma tomato. I like Roma tomatoes, but you're welcome to use other kinds. Heirloom is also really nice. Or if you don't have access at the moment to fresh tomatoes, you're welcome to use 1 can of diced tomatoes, rinsed and drained. I like also putting in 1 jalapeno pepper. This
Ooh, you see, that's why it's special.
that's we're giving it a little bit of a kick. Now you can adjust up or down as far as the amount of heat you want. I've tried it with a serrano pepper, and that I love it with a serrano pepper. A jalapeno is a little less heat. Um, no matter how little of the pepper you want, you're gonna get a kick from it. But for the amounts we're doing here, for the amount of macaroni we're making, I found that a smallish jalapeno pepper, um, chopped or diced, or if you've got a food processor, to chop it in the food processor. Now, you might, instead of having a bunch of cheddar cheese, that's why I only recommended 4 ounces of the cheddar cheese. I like using 4 ounces, which works out to roughly 4 slices of something like smoked provolone cheese or perhaps Asiago. I've had good results with that. I've also had good results with Munster, and I've had good results with Swiss. Or you can just go nuts and
You can
use
have five
different
different
mixes.
kinds.
You can do different mixes and matches. That's right. Um, you're going to want about a quarter cup. It's going to be roughly a handful of panko breadcrumbs. And those are your ingredients. Sounds like a lot, but if you do, what's the chef term? Mise en prep, you'll be fine.
Yes. Mise en
Okay.
place.
Yeah, mise en place. Okay,
Oh,
thank
we can
you.
change it, Michael.
Oh, that's all right. I can never remember. So yeah, I went to journalism school, not culinary school.
Hey, me either. Yeah, I was in journalism school too. So yeah.
Yep,
I'm not culinary. I'm like the
yep.
Rachel Ray. I just make it myself. Make it up myself.
Oh, exactly. The only thing I learned to cook in journalism school was ramen. So
Yeah.
that's all
Yep.
I had time for. So are we ready? Are we ready for the directions, or
Yes, we
do you
are.
have any questions about what we've done so far?
No, no, we're ready for directions.
Okay, so let's make this thing. Okay, you're going to want a pot that is both stovetop safe and oven safe. So you're looking for a pot that, even though we're not going to bring the temperature in the oven up to this, if you're working with a pot or a pan that is oven safe to 450 degrees, you're gonna be fine. You know, those kind of pots, usually that's they're accounting for the handle also. Um, but in a pot or pan that is oven safe, you're going to want to bring about 6 to 8 cups of water to a boil. So you're going to need a fairly deepish pot. But when the water begins to boil, you're going to add in the macaroni. You're probably going to want to add in the tablespoon of olive oil at this point also, and like a dash of salt. Not too much salt. You don't want to have salty macaroni. Um, and you
No,
really don't want to overpower it on the olive oil either, or your noodles, the macaroni is going to taste really greasy. But just a little bit of olive oil is going to help when over the next 8 minutes or so. 10 might be a little too much, but you're going to boil this over a high heat, and you're going to be stirring this on a regular basis so the macaroni doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. I say about 8 minutes or so, but you're going to want to keep a watch, or you're going to want to keep some presence on this, because maybe you're not 100% sure that you've had enough water. I add more than I need from a blindness perspective because I'd rather drain off the extra water. But you'll know if you haven't added enough, because you're going to hear after about 6 minutes or so, 5 to 6 minutes, you're going to hear a little sound.
sticking
Um,
to the pan.
that's right, sticking to the pan. At that point, you're going to say, "Uh-oh," you're going to turn the heat off and you're going to get that stuff out of the pan. But I kind of usually overdo it a little bit on the water just to avoid that, because I have a colander sitting in the sink nearby.
Right,
Um,
right.
so it takes roughly about 8 minutes or so. You're going to empty the macaroni into the colander, and you're going to discard any of the remaining pasta water. You don't need it for this recipe. In the original pot, though, you're going to keep that. You're going to put the pot back on the stove top, and you are going to reduce the heat to, let's say, medium low, but no more than medium. And at that point, when you've reduced the heat on the original pot, you're going to melt the butter, and you're going to saute the jalapeno pepper, or whatever pepper, if you're choosing to add pepper to the recipe. Um, I'd say about 3 to 5 minutes ought to be enough over medium heat to get the pepper sauteed enough that you can then add back in the macaroni. And you'll use a spatula to combine the macaroni and the jalapeno. At this point, it's super important to reduce the heat all the way down to low. Once the heat's down low, you're going to stir in the milk, the cheddar cheese, none of the other cheese, just the milk, the cheddar cheese, and the diced tomato, I'm going to say. You're throwing in the tomato.
The tomato.
You are welcome to say tomato. Um, Now, give it a little taste, and see how it tastes, and then add in your salt and pepper to taste. Maybe you don't want, say, ground pepper since you're using the jalapeno pepper. But if you're not using jalapeno pepper, put in a little bit of ground black pepper. I'd say just a pinch, just whatever like you can squeeze between your fingertips. That's going to be roughly like a quarter teaspoon, and any more than that is way too much pepper for this recipe. Um, why am I having or suggesting that you taste it right now? Because if it tastes okay now, now is when you stir in the beaten egg. Um, Taste it before you do the egg, because we do not want you tasting raw egg in this in this
That's right.
in
We
this
want you
workflow.
to live through the macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, we'd prefer you to get to the next step. Um, so
Just keep a poison control number next to you and you're set.
exactly. You're going to stir in the egg until it's combined. Then this is when you sprinkle across the top of the mixture. You're going to sprinkle the panko breadcrumbs on top of the mixture. You don't want to use so much that you can't, if you're using your fingers, feel the macaroni underneath. Um, a little more than a dusting, but if it becomes like a crust, that's too much. Um, because we need the macaroni to be able to breathe, so to speak. Um, but on top of the panko, that's when you put the other cheeses, whether you're using sliced cheese in like a layered pattern to cover it, or you're using shredded cheese, or grated, whatever, whichever method or whichever kind of cheese you like, and however it's being presented, it goes on top. And then after it goes on top, and this is especially helpful if you're using sliced cheese. I made this a couple weeks ago with sliced provolone on top. We want to do what's called venting the macaroni. You're going to take a knife and you're going to just push the knife through at about 4 to 6 different places so that you don't have like a hard seal. Because what'll
Oh,
happen is it's gonna bake, um, and we want to be able to get some airflow through the macaroni and cheese. Because once you have this all together, you're almost done, but you got a little bit of waiting to do because you are going to take this whole thing and you're going to put it in the oven that you have preheated to 350 degrees. Um, if you're good at the timing or if you're learning the timing, you can start heating the oven at the same point, like right before you start adding the milk and the cheese and the egg and everything at that point. And then by the time you're finished, your oven's going to ding. But you don't have to. You can do the whole mixture and then set it aside and then get the oven going. And then when the oven is preheated to 350 degrees, you're going to put the whole thing uncovered in the oven. I use the middle rack to give good airflow. And then I let it bake for 30 minutes. You can go a little longer, maybe 35. Um, if you're going closer to 45, it's a little too much. But 30, 35 minutes or so, you'll set a timer, or we can use that wonderful timer that works with voiceover. You can just say, "Hey Siri, turn the timer," set the timer, or you can use your Alexa. Um, and then after 35 minutes, you take it out, use those famous large oven mitts that go all the way back to your elbows.
the Ove
Uh,
glove.
the oven glove, yes, yes. Take it out, let it rest for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then have fun. You've made a fantastic comfort food recipe. Congratulations.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. You know what? I've never done the thing with the slices. I'm gonna try that. One day I'm gonna try with the slices, but
It's almost like you're making a casserole. Um,
yeah, it is a kind of a casserole. You know what's funny? Before I went on here, I looked at one of our old recipes from Barbados.
mhm.
We had a lady from Barbados on, and she was making what they call macaroni pie, and it was sort of a version of macaroni and cheese.
That's so lovely.
Yeah, it
It's
was
making
like
me
it's
hungry.
it's interesting because I always say that no matter where we are in the world, there's a version of whatever we eat. Here, uh, here's macaroni and cheese. You wouldn't think you'd be finding that in Barbados, but they just call it something different. So I just find that the various different recipes are just a little couple of ingredients changed away. So. That's my thought anyway. But well, as we end up here, what are some of the things, or what's something you tell your students who you're coaching, um, when they first go blind? What's some advice you give them?
When somebody becomes blind, it is such a it's such a life-changing event. Um, and I have to be honest that there is no one thing that works for every single person, but there is a way of framing what we're moving through in terms of how traumatic this can be. And it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation today that we can talk about our lived experience and we can also talk about our blindness, and they kind of weave in and out of each other because they're so central to the way we move through the world. But blindness is trauma. Becoming blind is traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
And we do not say it's no small thing. We don't just say, oh, it's only eyesight. You should get over this. Um, we can at the same time say that we are more than the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to us. We are all so much more than the most traumatic thing that has ever happened to us. We disregard that trauma at our peril because it must be acknowledged. It must be, I don't know if validated is the right word, but it must be acknowledged as something that has become part of the structure of how we interpret our world. We are interpreting our world through the prism of blindness. But who we are in the world and who we want to be in the world can be so much deeper than the stuckness that blindness sometimes brings out among even the best of us, Renee.
Right,
It,
right.
it's blindness is something that very few people actually experience in the world as a whole. So we are moving through a space that is very difficult for people who are not blind to really comprehend. And it involves a level of persistence on our part to incorporate that experience into our life. And it's going to be overwhelming a lot of the time. It just is. And it can be challenging to find the support and the community that um, understands what that world is like.
I
But
can believe that.
but the good news is, Renee, is that you know the blindness community, people like you and me, people like you who are providing a forum like this, and people like me who are moving through this community, we all have the good fortune to be standing on the shoulders of giants, the people in our world who have come before us and
right.
can attest to the fact that there is a certain amount of um, acceptance that we can move into and have as rich a life as we could ever hope for. It's quite amazing. This has been the adventure of my lifetime. Um, the last thing I want to say, I would be remiss. That friend of mine I told you about. I made the mistake of saying to her once in something that I wrote that, like, you know what? This is the best thing that ever happened to me because such and such and such. Because wonderful things have happened to me as a result of becoming blind. I have a better relationship with my family than I ever had. I've had more interesting travel experiences than I've ever had before. And I get to talk to people like you. But my friend really called me on the carpet and said, do you really believe that it's the best thing that ever happened to you? And now I realize I'm saying, well, I'll let you know when I actually get to that point. We don't want to live in we don't want to live in cliche. And we don't want to live without the reality of saying, this is a
Well,
very,
maybe you felt that way at the time, you know.
that's right, that's right. There are days that I do feel that, like, oh, I would not have this experience if it had not been for the experience of being blind. But um, my friend encouraged me, and I encourage anyone else that I work with as a coach to say, take that sentence and put a question mark on it rather than a period. Blindness is the best thing that ever happened to me, question mark. That leaves the door open to what coaching is all about, moving through inquiry and seeing what we discover on the other end.
Now, if anyone wants to reach out to you, Michael, how do they reach out to you?
I would encourage them to check out my website. The website is www.growthworkscoaching.com. Growthworkscoaching.com. That's the name of my coaching business, GrowthWorks Coaching. And I can give an email address. Do you prefer that here in the podcast or in the show notes?
No, you can put it here.
Okay. So my email address is michael@growthworkscoaching.com. Easy spellings for everything. It's all strung together. Um, Website's up and running. And I just always look forward to having the conversation with anybody who is at a place in their life where they're really working with that idea of how we are showing up in the world and who we are in the world. Um, Working with men and women in the blindness community is continuing to be just the calling of my life. And it's moved just everybody I work with and me into a place of communication and discovery that
That's a
is
great
just an
way
honor to
of
be a part
putting
of.
it. That's a really wonderful way of putting it. And thank you so much, Michael, for being with us here today. It's been wonderful. You're very philosophical in your thinking, and you give us lots of food for thought, pun intended, maybe.
Food for thought. Yeah. Yes.
And I just want to remind everyone that Michael's recipe, as well as many other recipes, can be found on our Cooking Without Looking uh, Cooking Without Looking website at www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com. Just want to remind you of our Cooking Without Looking holiday fundraiser. We've already had some people reach out to us, and we always do. We help however we can. We have our apron, our official Cooking Without Looking apron fundraiser. It's $55, and you can go to our website and click on the PayPal link at the top, and then just give us your address, and we will send you the apron. Please visit our YouTube channel, our Cooking Without Looking YouTube channel, which is we have 82 videos of people who are blind and visually impaired, um, actually cooking and giving many, many tips and many recipes. Our podcast, which is what you're listening to right now, can be found anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, as well as Victor Reader and all Alexa-enabled devices. So, again, thank you, Michael, for being here, and you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. And thank you for what you're doing. You take care.
You too.
Okay, bye bye.